We're broadcasting live from it's an outside broadcast. It's actually inside the foyer of the ABC Sydney headquarters in Harris Street in Ultimo. Welcome to all those people in the foyer with us. Thanks so much for joining us. Grab a banana, grab a fruit juice, and I hope you can stick around. Well, the latest tranche of the government's counter-terrorism legislation is going to be debated in this coming session of Parliament. It's called the Foreign Fighters Bill, and it makes it a criminal offence to be in a designated area, that could be parts of Iraq or parts of Syria, without a valid reason. Is there one element of the Foreign Fighters Bill, and there are many elements of it, one element in particular that gives you greatest concern?
Yes, Fran. The new offence of making it a crime to travel to or remain in a designated area without any criminal intention is the biggest issue that is raised by this very large body of laws that's being passed in this tranche, as they call it.
Okay, so what we're talking about here is designated areas, could be, as I said, part of Syria, part of Iraq in the terms of the current conflicts. What worries you about that?
All that needs to be proved to be liable for 10 years imprisonment is that you actually are in the area. There's no need to show that you've gone there to do something illegal, let alone gone there with an intention to advance any terrorism act or even any insurgency against the government. You will be liable to jail for being there.
Lydia, is that how you see the laws? I thought there was a burden of proof on somebody, it's not quite clear who, to prove that you were there for ill intent.
Well, we would obviously agree with the comments that were just made, but we would also say that in regards to the burden of proof, we would actually say that it's on the accused to prove that they weren't there for an illegitimate purpose. And we have to be quite careful when the law departs from obviously having the burden of proof being placed on the Crown or on the prosecution. So that's a concern for us. But not only that, more fundamentally, it's not going to work. So the intention behind this provision, it's not actually going to play out practically.
Why not?
People who are going to these areas that are engaged with terrorist organisations, they're not getting on a one-way ticket from here to Syria. They're entering the country by other means. And I think it's not going to work at all.
You mean they're not necessarily going to return to Australia with an Iraqi visa stamped on their passport?
Well, that's entirely right. That's correct.
Patrick, do you see that as an issue, that these laws might be good in practice if you agree with the intent, and clearly Phillip and Lydia don't, but that they're actually going to work because of that? People are going to be getting over borders, going somewhere else and hopping over borders through illegal means anyway.
It's mainly aimed at, obviously, at people that are going there that have no specific, demonstrable reason, which is stated in the legislation. There's criteria for going to these places, such as humanitarian reasons, family reasons. So there is criteria that, that you're not going to suddenly, if you end up in Syria, be charged straight away under this legislation. So there are criteria in the legislation, but I agree with Lydia. Logistically, how do you enforce this legislation can be problematic, and that, if you're a terrorist, a smart terrorist, you probably might travel, multiple destinations to get to these places. So you won't come back necessarily with that stamp in your passport. You may even travel on false documents,
Is that the point, though, if you're a smart terrorist? But what if you're a young kid from, suburbs of Brisbane or Melbourne or Sydney or wherever, and you're not a terrorist in essence, but you are revved up, you want to go do this, and you're not that smart, then they are likely to be caught by this, aren't they?
Well,
and isn't that who we're trying to stop?
We're talking a potentially very small minority of people here. It's not like a large lot of people that are going to these places. National security ultimately is the government's reflection on their duty to care for the safety and security of all citizens, including those that mean to do wrong things to this country. And so the governments have a duty of care to sort of say to people, whether people, take that advice or not and still go, to sort of say, well, you shouldn't go to these places because there's civil wars going on, there's terrorist activity going on. You might be full of ideas of, ideology which, for the best intentions, you believe in, but you could end up, not only killing other people, but killing yourself. Okay,
Phillip, I will come to you in a moment, but just Lydia on that. I mean, is that, in a sense, what these laws are meant to do, send a big, loud signal? But you're worried that the big, loud signal, they might not have thought through some of the implications of who might end up in jail.
Well, that's entirely correct. It seems to be casting a very wide net. For example, Beirut Airport, if that's controlled by Hezbollah, if that's in a Hezbollah area, just by going there in transit or going there for holidays, am I going to satisfy this offence? Yes, quite possibly. If parts of Indonesia which have Jemaah Islamiyah or another terrorist organisation operating in that area, over 1 million Australians travel to Indonesia every single year. So potentially we're placing those people under the watchful eye in regards to this provision as well.
But Phillip Boulten, is it really that that open? I mean, Patrick suggested there were specific criteria. It's not just going to Syria that would get you.
Yes, it is. What needs to be proved is that you are in the area. If you can then point to evidence to suggest you were there for a limited number of specified legitimate purposes, and then the Crown must disprove that beyond reasonable doubt. But if you're there for another reason that's not outlined in the list of acceptable reasons, for instance, going there for business, then you are committing the offence.
So business is not listed as a legitimate reason?
Business is not listed as one of the reasons. There should have been an intention put into the legislation.
What about this new offence of advocating terrorism? Lydia, you're concerned about that. Why?
I'm very concerned about that provision. We already have very comprehensive laws in regards to incitement of terrorist offences or commission of a terrorist offence. We already have very strong legislation in this area. I think this provision is so widely and expansively drafted that it could potentially capture those legitimate speech or legitimate debate and dialogue regarding religious debate and or perhaps public debate as well, specifically in relation to perhaps Australians' foreign policy, any criticisms of that, or indeed criticism of the foreign policy of Australians' allies as well.
This was one of the areas, Phillip, I know you're concerned about, but also the committee had some concerns about, didn't it?
Yeah, no one really knows what it means, is the short answer. It's something less than incitement, and it's something less than attempting to do something, but no one actually knows what promotion means. Advocacy has got a very wide definition, including promotion. The problem with this law is that it's going to catch people who are ahead of public opinion. So, for instance, people who are in favour of overthrowing the government in West Papua, they will be caught by promotion of their cause. People who were in favour of overthrowing the government in Libya will be caught by this if they're ahead of public opinion.
Sorry,
yes,
if I may also add, to put it in historical context as well, those supporting Fretland in relation to Indonesia and East Timor could have been caught under this provision, as well as Nelson Mandela and the ANC. That's right.
Patrick, I mean, I guess there's always people who are against the laws are going to find extreme examples, but you conceded that on the first topic we were talking about is perhaps a little broad. Is this another area that suggests this law is perhaps written too much in haste? Is this too broad, in your view?
Well, in my reading of it, it is a bit vague, and I mean, there's a difference between passing legislation and how that legislation operates in an operational environment. And so I have no question that these laws will be tested in due course, and they should be. And I take comfort in that, that we have the government's decided to reinstall the independent National Security Legislative Monitor that will look at legislation, and that the Parliamentary Joint Committee has decided that all of these provisions should be looked at within 2 years after they've been enacted.
In a sense, does that save these laws? If I could just have a quick whip around of all the panel, that the inquiry is insisting on a 2-year sunset clause, not a 10-year sunset clause. Lydia?
Well, obviously we would like to see this entire provision removed, but if that's the the short end of the game, then we would support that recommendation.
Phillip?
2-year sunset clause applies to some of these provisions, not many, and it's better than the 10-year sunset clauses that were contemplated previously.
By and large, Patrick, given the reservations you've had today, on balance, do we need these laws? Do you agree with the level of terrorism threat we face today?
I think given the threat we face, they're appropriate. What I do take heart in is that in Australia we have a very good, powerful accountability system for our intelligence agencies, in particular the Independent Legislative Monitor, but also the Inspector General for Intelligence Security, which has the standing powers of a Royal Commission that can go into ASIO tomorrow and say, show us your books, what are you doing? It's a very unique, powerful, autonomous organisation that we'll be looking closely at these laws as well.
Okay, and just very finally to you, Lydia, because you are a member of the Muslim Legal Network, what is the response or the reaction to these laws within the Muslim community as far as you understand it?
Look, we're quite concerned in relation to the declared areas and advocacy provision. In regards to the advocacy provision, we're quite concerned that those members of Australian public who do pose a legitimate threat to Australia will be pushed further underground. It's actually going to be harder to monitor those who perhaps have some nefarious intent. In regards to the declared areas, we note that perhaps Shia Muslims, when they go on religious pilgrimage, are going to be caught by that provision. And also, it doesn't take into account the fluidity of war. In one area, one day you could be outside the declared area, but the next day war's on your doorstep. So practically it's not going to work either.
All right, Lydia Shelly, Patrick Walsh and Phillip Boulten, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lydia Shelly is solicitor with the Muslim Legal Network. Phillip Boulten SC represents the Law Council of Australia, and Dr. Patrick Walsh is from the Australian Graduate School of Policing.